So you finally decided to try Warframe. And I'm guessing you've loaded the game up for the first time and watched the intro cutscene?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Then I guess you're here because you want to know which is the best starter Warframe to pick. Well, you're in luck, my fellow Tenno, as today I'm going to help you decide which of the starter Warframes you should choose. We're going to take a look at each of the 3 frames and do a deep dive into their abilities, their strengths and weaknesses, and hopefully by the time we're done here, you'll know exactly which Warframe is the right fit for you. So, who are the 3 starter frames that are available to us? Well, we have Excalibur, who's your go-to melee powerhouse / space ninja, Volt, who is our speedy zappy boy, and Mag, who specialises in throwing enemies around the room. Now obviously there's a little more to each frame than that, but before we get into the nitty gritties of each of them, I just wanted to say, don't worry too much about selecting the wrong frame at this stage. You'll be able to unlock the other frames later on, and will only be forced to play as this frame for the first couple of hours before being able to unlock more frames. So let's jump in and take a closer look at each of these starter Warframes. I'll leave timestamps in the description below to help you find your favourite frames throughout the video. And with that, let's take a look at Excalibur. Excalibur, also known later in the game as Arthur, is the starter frame selected the most, and with good reason. The general consensus is that of the 3 starter frames on offer, Excalibur is probably the easiest one to get to grips with the fastest. He's a melee orientated frame with abilities that are simple to understand, but incredibly effective. His first ability, Slash Dash, allows Excalibur to dart between enemies, slashing at them with his exalted blade as he passes. His second ability, Radial Blind, emits a bright light that temporarily blinds enemies. This could be super useful when you're getting overwhelmed, or to get an easy mercy kill on some of those tougher enemies. His third ability, Radial Javelin, impales nearby enemies in range, and his fourth and most iconic ability is Exalted Blade. This ability allows Excalibur to summon a sword of pure light. This sword slowly drains your energy whilst active, but allows you to do massive damage to multiple enemies with each attack, thanks to the shockwaves created from each swing of the sword. Excalibur also has a passive that allows him to deal 10% more damage and attack 10% faster whilst wielding a sword. Overall, Excalibur is a phenomenal frame that calls out to the players that enjoy hacking and slashing their way through a mission. He has well-balanced stats and easy-to-use abilities. It's no wonder that he's the starter frame with the highest selection rate. Of course, that being said, Excalibur relies heavily on using swords to make the most of his kit. This means that as a new player, it can feel kinda restrictive when you're limited to a smaller selection of melee weapons. Also, whilst Excalibur's abilities are solid in the early stages of the game, they do fall off significantly as you enter the endgame. So you probably want to know how you can get hold of Excalibur later on if you don't select him as your starter. Well, good news, he's real easy to get hold of. The main blueprint can be purchased from the marketplace, and the 3 other blueprints can all be obtained from farming Lieutenant Lech Krill in the assassination mission on Mars. The drop rates are pretty high, so it shouldn't take too long to get hold of them. Oh, and one last thing before we move on to the next frame that I should probably mention, and that's that there is a particular quest that upon completion unlocks a frame known as Umbra Excalibur. This frame is the super edgy turbocharged ninja version of Excalibur, and he is definitely worth looking out for. Let's move on to our next frame. This is Mag. Mag, or later known as Owie, has the ability to manipulate metal, meaning she can stop bullets, strip armor, and throw her enemies around the room. Mag is considered to be the most difficult starter frame, largely due to her abilities having far more complexity than the others. This doesn't mean she's harder to play though, it just means you might need to invest some time reading up on her abilities before diving in. Let me help give you a head start. Her first ability, Pull, kinda does what it says on the tin. It pulls all the enemies in front of Mag towards her and leaves them in a pile on the floor. Her second ability, Magnetize, can do 2 different things depending on whether you tap or hold the ability. Tapping whilst facing an enemy will encase them in a bubble. This bubble will drag anything that enters it into the centre. This of course applies to both enemies and bullets. Holding the ability, however, allows you to catch bullets fired at you. Tapping it again allows you to fire those bullets right back at the enemy. Mag's third ability is Polarize. This ability emits an energy pulse that depletes enemy shields and armour, whilst restoring yours and your allies' shields. In addition to this, enemies hit by the pulse will drop shards, which when picked up will orbit Mag and will cut enemies who get too close. Her fourth and final ability is called Crush. Crush lifts all enemies in range up into the air before slamming them back down to earth. dealing massive damage and granting bonus shield. Her passive is a little on the weaker side, making loot gravitate towards Mag to make them easier to collect. This is nice to have in the early game, but when you unlock companions, this ability is very quickly replaced. Mag is overall an incredibly powerful frame, which is more than capable of clearing the star chart and, if built correctly, will be able to clear the majority of Steel Path missions. Her crowd control abilities allow her to prevent an overwhelming number of enemies from becoming too much to handle, all whilst applying massive damage in a large area. As I mentioned though, she is a higher skill cap frame, meaning you will need to do your research to really get the most out of her kit. Her complicated abilities and smaller than average health pool often catch out new players, but with a little investment can become an absolute weapon of mass destruction. If you want to unlock Mag later on, much like Excalibur, you can purchase the main blueprint from the marketplace and obtain the rest from farming the Sergeant in the assassination mission on Phobos. Now let's take a look at our third and final frame, Volt. Volt, also known later on as Amir, is a bit of a jack-of-all-trades frame, capable of providing support to his team through buffs and crowd control, in addition to dealing huge damage over a large area. His first ability is Shock, which fires out a lightning bolt that chains to nearby enemies, stunning and damaging them. His second ability, Speed, grants Volt and allies a speed and reload buff. Increasing your ability power will also boost your movement speed significantly, which can be a lot of fun. His third ability is Electric Shield. Activating the ability will drop an electric shield on the floor, which will block enemy projectiles. As a bonus, you can pick up the shield and run around with it to keep you and your allies protected whilst on the move. Then we have Volt's fourth ability, Discharge. This ability sends out a wave of electricity. When this wave hits an enemy, they'll be paralysed and will send out a bolt of lightning to other nearby enemies. This ability can chain back and forward between affected enemies until its duration ends, resulting in absolutely massive damage and a long-lasting crowd control effect. Volt's passive allows him to build up 10 damage for every meter travelled that is unleashed on his next attack, meaning the more you move around, the more damage you do. Volt can be a lot of fun and is incredibly versatile. His abilities can provide some great utility to a team, as well as being capable of pumping out some satisfying damage. He's an all-round solid frame who is more than able to work his way through to the Steel Path. If you want to know how to unlock him later on, then I have good news, as Volt is probably the easiest frame to obtain. You'll need to join a clan who has researched the blueprints and purchase them from the clan dojo at the Tenno Lab. The main blueprint costs 35,000 credits, and the other blueprints cost 15,000 credits each. So we've covered each of the 3 starter frames that we have on offer, but how do you decide which frame you want to play? Really, it comes down to your preferred playstyle. If darting from enemy to enemy and getting up close and personal is your thing, then Excalibur is certainly the frame that you'll want to choose first. If you like the idea of tossing enemies around like ragdolls, creating big old bubbles of death, and don't have a problem with investing some time into understanding the ins and outs of your frame, then Mag is definitely the frame for you. And finally, if you like the idea of shielding your team, speeding around a map, and literally nuking every enemy within reach of you, then Volt will certainly not disappoint you. Like I mentioned earlier though, picking the wrong frame at this stage of the game isn't something you need to be concerned about, as you'll be able to unlock the other frames within the first hour or 2 of playing. Each of the starter frames are more than capable of carrying you to the Steel Path, and with the right build, can go even further. Warframe is a game of collecting different warframes and weapons, and with over 59 different frames to choose from, you're going to find something that suits your playstyle soon enough anyway. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, come check out my channel, leave a sub, and maybe let me know who your first frame was in the comment section below. I'll see you in the next one, Tenno.